Have you ever pulled up the tracks to a worship song you're going to be playing so you can listen to the keys parts? You probably start off feeling fine. Okay, I've got a piano, then I have keys 1, it's just a pad. I can layer those things together. Then you see keys 2, it's another pad. Keys 3, maybe a lead part. Keys 5, a sequence. Keys 7, strings. Keys 9, is that a Hammond B3 organ? Keys 12, synth bass. There's no way I can cover all of that from the keyboard, right? Modern worship songs are filled with keys parts. This is a part of modern worship music, what defines the sound. And let me let you in on a little secret. 90% of the time, all of those keys parts you hear aren't from the live recording, but they're actually tracked in the studio. And that's honestly fine. Of course, it would be near impossible for the keys player from that live album recording to actually pull off keys 1 through 12 live and have it translate and be usable for the end purposes of a polished live recording. The real problem comes to us, the volunteer keys players or worship leaders just trying to bring their best from the keyboard to their weekend worship services. Because most of the time, there's going to be a lot of range to those 15 different key sounds that all show up on that single song. How can you figure out how to pull off these sounds live without quitting your day job and becoming a full-time sound designer yourself? This video aims to explain all of the common worship sounds that you need to be able to play modern worship music and not have to invent everything yourself from scratch. There's going to be examples along the way that you can listen to and identify so that when you hear those kinds of sounds on the songs your church is going to play, you're not starting from zero. For these examples, I'm going to be using our Sunday Keys app. So if you use Sunday Keys, you can actually follow along and pull up those exact sounds for yourself anytime you find something that you like. But if you don't use Sunday Keys, if you use a different software or hardware keyboard for your live key sounds, you can still use these audio examples as touchstones for you to find or create similar sounds in your own environment. So this video is going to be really valuable for you if you're a worship keys player, no matter what solution you use for your live keyboard rig. So this video is going to work kind of Lord of the Rings style. We are going to build one patch to rule them all. A patch is just a collection of sounds, and we're going to cram a ton of common worship sounds into this patch and then pull back layers that we might not need for a specific moment or song. This is going to give you flexibility so you don't have to spend hours and hours prepping for every single weekend worship service, and you have something that can be a go-to for you. Make sure you watch through the entire video so you actually get to hear the differences between these audio examples. Understanding the difference between common worship sounds is one of the most important skills for a worship keys player to have. So listening to each of these audio examples is going to give you a big head start towards that. And make sure you watch through to the end, because I'm going to show you how you can pull down the exact set list, including this one patch to rule them all, and use it inside of the Sunday Keys app. The gear setup that I'm using is super simple. I'm using the Sunday Keys app running on my iPad. There is a USB hub that's connected to a power source, so that provides power to the iPad. And I use that USB hub so that I can connect my keyboard to the hub, and so I can connect an audio interface to the hub. And those things together make up the entirety of the rig. So the keyboard tells the app what notes I'm playing. The app sends the resulting audio to the audio interface, and the hub is sort of what connects everything together and provides power. Other than YouTube's built-in audio compression, there is no post-processing applied to the audio. You are just hearing the direct output of the app. We're actually using the iPad's built-in screen recording function to capture the audio, so there's nothing else in the signal path. It's just what's coming out of the app. Okay, so let's start off with the very basics. We're going to talk about pianos. If you're a worship keys player watching this video, you understand how important a good piano is. And you probably also understand how important it is to be building your skills on a regular basis, keeping up with trends, changes, and new developments in modern worship music. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, we put out a new free resource, a new free tutorial, guide, or training like this video every single week. So if you would, hit the subscribe button if you want to keep up with what we're doing here at Sunday Sounds. So let's start off talking about pianos. I'm going to tap Add Sound here, go to the Sunday Keys folder in my browser, and I can view all of the pianos that I have available to me. Let's start off with acoustic pianos. So inside of software, these are emulations or sample-based versions of actual physical acoustic piano instruments where you've got hammers hitting strings. Very distinct sound all over modern worship music and pretty much every genre of music other than, maybe some of the heavy genres. Let's start off with my favorite go-to piano sound. This is the SK Grand. I'm just gonna pull up this main version. Now, the browser inside of Sunday Keys allows me to audition different sounds while I'm in the browser, which makes it quick and easy to identify the exact kind of vibe that I'm looking for. So I could pull up this ambient version of the SK Grand. There's tons more reverb. I can hear that difference right away. Maybe that is or isn't what I'm looking for. So I could go to something that's very dry, this room version. Or I could pull up this really close, intimate, soft piano. Check out this one. You hear that difference between this soft piano and this very aggressive, crushed piano. So here we have the same grand piano sound, and it's a great grand piano, but it's processed in different ways, and that makes a huge difference. So when you identify, oh, this is a piano sound, you have to also think about what kind of piano sound is it? And that's something that only comes with time, hearing and practicing with different examples. Let's talk about an entirely different feel of piano. This is an upright piano sound. So it's kind of more intimate, it's warmer, it's not as big in size. It feels like it's sitting inside of your living room. Even more close is a felt piano, where there's a strip of felt between the hammers and the strings. You hear a lot of the mechanical noise of a felt piano. It's a very characteristic sound, very specific. So just those three examples demonstrate sort of the vast expanse of different kinds of piano sounds that you might be asked to fill a similar space from the worship keys position. For this one patch, let's stick with something that's sort of right in the middle. The most common kind of piano sound that you're going to hear on modern worship music is a nice full grand piano. So I'm going to pull in this main hall of the SK Grand. I'll tap Add Sound. Now I've got this sound in Module 1 of Sunday Keys ready to use. So that's a bit about acoustic pianos, but there's more than just acoustic pianos in modern worship music. I want to talk about two other kinds of piano sounds that you're going to run into all the time. I'm going to pull down the volume of this grand piano, and then we'll add a sound to Module 2. This time, instead of choosing acoustic pianos, let's look at electric pianos. Now, there are several iconic models or styles of electric pianos. There's sort of two most common. There's a Wurlitzer, which is a reed-based electric piano, or a Rhodes style, which is a tine-based electric piano. And these have been around for decades and are still quite popular and prevalent, both in their original forms, which have sort of been revitalized or in the process of being revitalized lately, and then tons and tons of emulations, recreations, both inside of hardware keyboards and in the software domain. So here's a little sort of a quiet Wurlitzer sound. And then here's a very bright, dry Rhodes sound. And we've got several different flavors of electric pianos in Sunday Keys. Here's a couple more so you can hear the difference. This one has a chorus effect on it. has a little bit of a liquid, sort of a warbly feel. This one's sampled from my own Rhodes Mark IV electric piano and sampled the direct output of the Rhodes and then also in stereo 2 microphones over the tines themselves, so you actually hear the mechanical noise of the electric piano, which is a very unique, super cool sound. Here's how that sounds. I want to find sort of a middle-of-the-road electric piano sound as well. I'm a big fan of this Tiny Rhodes preset that we have in Sunday Keys. Sort of a classic electric piano sound. All right, this is gonna sit right in the middle. I'm gonna add this to sound 2. Now, we're gonna talk about a third kind of piano sound just briefly, and that's digital pianos. These are sort of hardware, software emulations from all sorts of different sound design and synthesis techniques that are still supposed to fill that piano space. I'll just show you a couple examples. This is a very popular, iconic electric piano preset. This is from the old DX7 FM synthesizer. Instantly recognizable. And then we have a couple more that you're probably also gonna recognize just by ear, like you've heard this before. These are all presets from the old MKS20 digital piano module. They don't sound real, but they sound specific and they're recognizable. These have shown up all over many genres of music for several decades now. And they sound awesome. So sometimes when you hear a piano sound that has a bit of an acoustic quality, but it doesn't feel quite right, it might actually be a digital version, like a digital acoustic piano sound or a digital electric piano sound. So you've got acoustic pianos, electric pianos, and then digital pianos. And between those three spaces, you're probably gonna be able to cover most of the bases. For our one patch to rule them all, we're gonna stick with the grand piano and then the Rhodes style electric piano. Next up, we've got to talk about pads. Worship music is filled with pads. These are sounds that fill space, that sustain for as long as you hold them, that often have a bit of an ambient character or a string-like character. Some can be brassy, some could be dark, some could be very static or still, meaning you hold the note and it doesn't change very much as you play or as you sustain the note. Other pads might have lots of motion. As you play, the sound evolves, shifts, and moves over time. But if you hear a synthesizer kind of sound that sustains for a long time as the notes are allowed to sustain, that's what we would typically call a pad. And the most common combination of sounds in worship music today is still a piano and a pad. So let's find a great pad sound for the third module inside of Sunday Keys. Sunday Keys has lots of pads. If you have a hardware keyboard or different software, I guarantee it has lots of pads too. So just listen to these examples and you can find similar options. They might not be as specific. They might need some more work to dial in. Let's start off by looking for a warm pad. And there's tons and tons of pads inside of Sunday Keys. We don't have time to go through all of them. We've got other videos demonstrating some of them if you'd like to check it out. I'm just gonna scroll through here and show you a couple of my favorites. This warm pad 2 is really, really nice. It's just a subtle pad, it doesn't take up tons of space. And it's not super huge in the low end or in the low mid-range, so it doesn't build up and get muddy. Another pad that I really love in Sunday Keys is this rich synth pad. This one starts warm, and then as you move up the mod wheel, which you can do in the app here, I've got it connected to my hardware as well, it gets brighter. So that gives me some dynamic range, which could be really useful in a sort of a master patch, which is what we're trying to build here. I'm gonna go for, though, in the end, this coastal path pad. Check this out. This isn't a huge sound, but it has a little bit of a haunting quality and just enough motion as the notes are sustained. So let's add this one here to Sound Module 3, and then I'm going to layer in the piano so you can hear these two together. The piano definitely sits out on top, and then as those notes fade, the pad takes over and keeps things glued together. Okay, so let's talk about some other kinds of pads. Often in worship music, you'll have more than one ambient or pad-like sound in the same song. Sometimes they'll adjust the volumes of these pads in or out, up or down. Sometimes they'll be brighter or darker. There's a lot of dynamics to worship music. Bringing in or out sounds is often how this is accomplished when an album or a song is being mixed in the studio. So let's talk about bright pads. Bright just means a sound that has more high frequency content. Our ears are sensitive to it. It stands out on top of a lot of other instruments in the mix, and it makes a noticeable statement. So let's just go with big bright pad. And in this layer patch that we're building, you can hear that up on top. Now, a different kind of bright pad could have a totally different effect. This one's very aggressive. But for me, because this patch is going to end up being quite large, I want some brightness, but I don't want it to be overwhelming. So if I were going to use a bright pad in this patch, I might go for this specific big bright pad. A little bit on the nose, sure, but it's functional. But instead of going for a bright pad here, because I know we're going to keep adding to this big patch, I'll have other bright sounds. I might instead choose a shimmer pad, because I know I want to be able to fill sort of an ambient space. Now, you've probably heard the term shimmer if you've been around worship music for a while. It's a particular audio effect that processes octaves generating up of what you play through reverbs and through cascades of pitch shifting up and up and up. It has this sort of angelic quality, which is described as shimmery, thus the name. Shimmer reverb is kind of the other half of the effect. But you can apply that effect to different sorts of instruments, and in Sunday keys, we've applied it to a lot of pads. So the pads themselves have that shimmery quality. So I'm going to go here and bring out these other sounds so that you can hear just the shimmer. Let's start off with big shimmer pad. So this is not a warm pad at all. There's almost no low end to it. It's all focused on the top end. It leaves space for everything else. This, in contrast, is a big pad that is also shimmery. That's why it's deep shimmer pad. Here's another option. This is one of my favorites because it doesn't immediately come in as you play. It takes a little bit of time. I think this could be really nice for our giant patch because the initial attack of other sounds is going to have some space, and then this shimmer pad is going to fade in over time and add that sort of interest. So let's stick with this one. Next up, let's find a couple great lead sounds to use. We're going to focus on two different kinds of lead sounds. The first is a polyphonic lead sound. That means I can play multiple notes and all of them are going to register and the synthesizer is going to play them back. So I'm going to go to leads. I can view the list of lead sounds that are available in Sunday keys. Let's try this brilliant synth bells. Got like a bell-like character. Look for something different here. Here's dance lead. Pretty cool. Definitely more of a synthy trance sort of vibe. Here's a horn sound. Super vintage. Could totally have a place in some modern worship songs, but definitely not generic enough for what I'm looking for. Let's try this one, Forever New pluck lead. I really love that sound. It's definitely a bell-like sort of lead. And then the sustain, or the tail of the sound, is a bit more ambient, a bit more pad-like. It also spans a large range on the keyboard, which could be useful for me if I want to cover different sounds. That's represented by this pink bar floating over the keyboard. Now in Sunday Keys, I can adjust the layer range of any sound by just tapping the layer editor here, dragging these around, or I can tap that, play a note, and set the range. So I'm going to put this pluck lead up in the top in the right hand. The next kind of sound that I want is a mono lead, meaning it only plays one note at a time, but it's more than just a mono lead. I want something that is sort of grungy, sort of dirty and noisy sounding. And I'll show you why in just a second. So let's see, this chiptune saw. Okay, that's a cool lead sound, but it's very, very specific. That's got that pitch vibrato, which is really cool, but it might stand out in the mix a bit too much to be considered for this sort of generic patch. That's really cool, but also quite specific. It makes me think of, what's that song? One Thing? Maybe that's it. I can't remember. Is that the right name? Let me know in the comments. Let's try this one, Hawkins Synth. That one is very cool. That could work. I'm looking for something that's noisier though. And this is one of my favorites. If you watched our videos, you've seen me pull up this sound before. It's called dystopic lead. It's really noisy, but it sort of sits underneath a little bit in overall volume. And this is one of my favorite sounds because of how well it layers with sounds that you might not expect it to. So even just with this other lead sound, bring back in these pads and our piano. So it's just adding noise, it's adding grit, it's adding some interest and some complexity to the sound. Now it starts off full range and we definitely want to very specifically set the range of this sound. So I'm gonna bring the layer editor here, and I think I'll actually learn this up to C4. So when I play in that right hand, I have that sound available, and then lower notes are not impacted or don't trigger that very noisy, very noticeable lead sound. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that a lot of the keys parts you hear on live recordings are actually written, composed, and played in the studio. So during those live recordings, those keys parts are often already tracked, and then they're actually just played back as backing tracks, and the band plays along with them. These are often arps and sequences, very specific time-based effects. But just because they were tracked in the studio originally doesn't mean that you can't pull them off live. So let's pull in 3 different time-based sounds. I'm gonna look for 2 arps and then 1 sequence, and I'll explain the difference as we go. Let's go back to Sunday Keys, arps and sequences. We'll start with arps. First, I'm going to look for a right hand arp. And in Sunday Keys, that just means an arp where the layer range of the sound itself is based in the right hand. So as you're playing melodic parts or right hand piano chords, this arp is going to be in that same range and you're going to get something back. So let's try a couple. This is definitely sort of a texture sound. And it's very simple and repeating. Really cool sound, can work in a lot of worship songs, but maybe not in every worship song. So let's try a couple more. That one's really cool. I like that. This one has a bit more space, which I really, really like because, again, this patch is going to end up being quite big in terms of how much is going on. So I think we'll choose this right-hand arp. Now, because I'm going to be layering these arps and sequences together, I'm going to keep that right-hand arp with its volume turned up so that I can hear it. And now we're gonna look for a different kind of arp. The second kind is a chord arp. What that means is as I play chords, it actually outputs every note in the chords I play back to me at each step of the arp. Let me show you an example with this cheesecake lead. Hear that chord pulsing back to me. Let's see, find a couple more options here. So it's more of a driving sort of pulsing feel. You can definitely build up a bridge with that kind of sound. Let's try one more. That one's very fast, at least at the tempo I am right now. So I could bring down the tempo. Let's see. And then I found a purpose for this, and maybe for a slower song, this could actually work very well. So I like the way that these two sounds blend together. So let's add just a bit more complexity. I'm gonna leave these in the mix a touch, but turn their volume down to where I'd probably have them if I were gonna use them in a song. Let's pull in a sequence. Now I said arps and sequences are similar, but they're not the exact same thing. A sequence requires that you play in a specific key to output a sequence of notes that have been pre-programmed for that key. And in Sunday Keys, we built in key detection. So if you load a sequence in, you just need to make sure that your play in and hear in keys match the key that you intend to play this patch in. So I've been playing in C, and I have play in and hear in set to C. So when I pull in a sequence, it's automatically going to detect the current key and make sure that that version of the sequence is loaded in. Makes it super simple for you to have this stuff without needing to understand how all of the MIDI programming works behind the scenes. Now, let's try a couple different sequences and hear how these sound. In Sunday Keys, all sequences are triggered by left-hand bass notes, so they don't get in the way of your right hand, but they still give you some melodic, interesting stuff going on while you just play the specific bass notes to trigger them. So as I play different bass notes, I get a melodic sequence that intelligently corresponds to the key of the song, or the key that I'm playing the patch in. And I can move as fast or slow as I'd like. And of course, these are fully editable as well, so I could add this in, and if I wanted to make any specific adjustments to the sequencer, I could tap on the sequencer, change the notes in the sequence, change details, specifics about the sequence. And if I wanted to play this patch in a different key, I could just change play in and hear in to whatever key I needed to perform in, and the sequence is automatically going to follow along. So I'm going to bring the volume of that down a little bit, and with all three of these layers together, let's hear how we're able to fill space just playing basic piano chords. In fact, I'm actually going to bring this piano in the mix as well. So here's a grand piano and these three time-based sounds all together. So all those extra little pieces of melodic and rhythmic interest is oftentimes what pushes a song over the edge to feeling like a fully polished, well-produced song. And to be able to pull off these parts live, you have to have an understanding of the different sorts of techniques and the difference between an arp and a sequence and how you approach playing those two kinds of sounds. Inside of Sunday Keys, having them separated out and pre-programmed makes this a lot easier if that's something that you do want to do live. Next, let's talk about organs. There's lots of different kinds of organs, from cathedral pipe organs of old to Hammond B3, Vox Continental, the early origins of organ sounds that weren't requiring these massive investments, this crazy technology that's behind pipe organs, all the way up to modern digital and synth-based organ sounds. The most common kind of organ sound still, and especially given recent trends in modern worship music, is still the king, the Hammond B3 style organ. So within that space, there's tons of different things that you can do. You can wash it out and make it ambient, like a pad organ. This is a classic worship organ sound. Or you can have it be a bit more dry. You could put a chorus effect on it. Just like the classic chorus setting on an actual B3. But for us, we want something that's sort of simple and clean. Something that will blend in with our pads, that won't get in the way of our lead sounds. So I think this is where we're gonna go for this one patch. Now, at this point, I'm gonna just play something for you for a second. It's called Subscribe Music. This is just music I play while you hit the subscribe button, if you haven't already. We appreciate it. It's a great way to support the channel, and you won't miss our next videos. Hard to give a pitch while improvising a part that you've not practiced. I think it's going pretty well. Are you done? I'm running out of ideas and the ability to multitask. Let's stop there. Did you do it? Now, I mentioned pipe organs, cathedral organs, and I think it's a good idea in our master patch to have one of those as well for that all-out moment where we just want to blow people's faces off with this huge sound. So I'm going to pull in this pipe organ preset that we have in Sunday Keys. It's huge, it's epic, it's very brassy and aggressive. But it is voiced for worship music. So if I bring the volume down just a bit and layer it in, let's try layering it with these pads that I have. Then here we are all of a sudden at our sold out arena rock concert, basically Coldplay, which honestly is a lot of modern worship music too. So as we transition from pipe organs, cathedral organs, let's talk about other sort of classically inspired orchestral sounds. First off, modern worship music has lots of different string sounds, and we have different string presets that we can tap into in Sunday Keys. Now, some of these are big sort of ensemble string sounds like this one. This is purposely voiced and EQ'd to not be this giant booming orchestra, because we know in worship music, a lot of the time you're going to be layering this with pianos and with pads. So you don't necessarily want to fill all of the sonic space that you could. Instead, you just need the texture, the bowing, the breath, the air of those string sounds. This one's really voiced like a pad. That slow, subtle fade in over time. We also have some more interesting textural things that you can do with strings. In Sunday Keys, we have this very particular instrument called the wispy violin, and it's a really cool, sort of evocative string sound. And there's several different articulations available. This is a more specific effect that you'd be doing to add interest to your song. For the purpose of our generic sort of one patch to rule them all, I think we should pick an ensemble string sound that can cover a lot of the bases. We can layer that with our organ. And just those two sounds together is awesome. Let's add another orchestral sound. I'm going to add some bells to the right hand. So I'm going to go to Strings and Orchestra, Bells, Glass, and Metal. I have vibraphone, I have church bells, I have a finger piano, which is really cool, but for me, I'm going to look at this SK Glockenspiel. There's a lot of overtones, a lot of harmonics. I'm going to place this so that it's only falling in the right hand. I'm going to set the same breakpoint as that dystopic lead from earlier, so that means C4. This is a really, really beautiful sound to layer with your piano or even with a Rhodes. Okay, next up, let's talk about guitars. And if you're a guitarist watching this video, don't get angry. I'm not talking about just replacing you or doubling all of your parts unnecessarily. I'm talking about those guitar textures that you hear on worship songs. And if you've only got one or two electric guitarists in your band, all of those extra guitar parts were probably tracked in the studio. Or if it was a live recording, they had 3 or 4 different electric guitarists on stage who were actually playing those parts. If you have a smaller band and you want to fill that same space, you can do it from the keyboard. So let's go to the guitar category and we can check a couple things out. First off, we could double up or replace guitar parts if we were missing a guitarist. Like an ambient guitar, clean guitar. Now this isn't fooling anybody in isolation, but if you're in the full mix and you just need to fill that space or thicken up one electric guitarist on stage, this will do the trick. We've also got digital style guitars. This is an FM synth guitar. Sort of a classic 80s sound. You could go for an ambient sort of tremolo guitar. So in the guitar category itself, I have some options for sort of doubling or replacing guitars that might be absent or needed in the mix. But what I'm looking for is to just fill this sort of guitar-y space. So check this pad out. It's called Guitar Trem Pad. This is that very fast, all reverb tremolo picking that's so often used in modern worship music. We've sampled that kind of a performance and used it to create this pad. So it's very subtle, it's gonna sit in the background, which is just what I want from this kind of sound. And if you want to be able to bring that sort of vibe to your band and you don't have a guitarist who's comfortable doing it, or if they're gonna be playing more prominent parts, you can do that with the right pad selection from the keyboard. Okay, we've got one sound to go. Let's talk about synth bass. This is the foundation of a patch like this. And here we're not talking about replacing your live bassist, but instead doubling or layering with your bass player to thicken up what they're doing and to make them sound better and to add interest to what they're playing. Or sometimes you might actually not have a bass player and you do need to fill all of the low end. You can do that from the keyboard too. So let's go to the bass category. And we've got lots and lots of choices. You've got bass sounds that sustain for as long as you hold them, and you've got bass sounds that only have an initial pluck attack and then they fade out. So depending on whether you need to play really rhythmically, or if you want to be able to just fill the low end with something on the changes. When you think of bass, you probably just think of low end, filling that space. But a real bass has lots of high end in the pick attack or the finger attack as well. So you can use synth bass sounds that have the ability to fill some of that space too. This buzz bass sound is very aggressive. It's buzzy. Check it out. I'm using the mod wheel here, which is connected to my software, to adjust the brightness of that bass sound. So if you layer this in with pianos and synths, that brightness actually ends up making the overall sound have more air in it. And it's coming from a bass sound. So when you're listening to bass parts on the songs you're playing, don't just notice the low end, the fundamental, what bass note are they playing, but how much space is being filled in the complexity harmonically above the actual bass note. For me, in this patch, I have so much going on with these other 14 other sounds that I actually do want a bass sound without a ton going on up top. So I'm gonna scroll down here. And while I'm doing so, I just wanna very briefly show you, this is a sound called real bass. It's a P bass. And if you ever did need to fill that space, maybe your bass player calls in sick or you don't have one, you can put that in the low left hand, piano and pads in the middle, and you could get by if you needed to do so. For me, I'm gonna be doubling up the bass, and I just wanna improve or strengthen or glue together the low end. And I don't want tons of brightness because I'm gonna get that from other sounds in the patch. So I'm gonna choose this sub bass. It's all low end. Now we have 15 sounds, and the only thing left to do is turn the volume of all of them up to 11, every single one, and it's gonna sound really, really good because we have a lot of sounds, and people love sounds, and worship music is supposed to be full. Here we go. Well, okay, clearly it's clipping, there's way too much going on, but there's some good stuff in there. It doesn't sound as bad as I thought. Of course, we're not done. Now that we have 15 great sounds that we could use, we have to figure out which ones we should use for a given song. So I'm gonna bring the volume of everything back down, and then we're gonna build a patch for a specific song. So let's do Praise by Elevation. That's trendy and cool and has nice keys parts in it. So I'm gonna change the key of this patch to A. We'll just play it like the original. And I think that one, let me check my notes, that's at 127. So I will just tap in 127. And now we are in A and the tempo is set, so all my arps and sequences are gonna be ready to go. So first off, I know I need a piano. Okay, so I need to pick some other layers to go in with this. And let's start with just nailing that right hand. So I want brightness. Okay, I also know that I want to fill the low end. So I'm going to go over here and grab my sub bass. Okay, let me see about bringing in a little ambience. Nice. Okay, so now I need to start filling space. The right hand has some note definition, the left hand has that sub bass, and now I need to fill things out a little bit. So I'm gonna go to my Arps, and let's see what we get right out of the gate for free. So that Arp feels a little fast. I'm gonna open the Arp itself and just have the subdivision. So I went from 16th notes to 8th notes. So now this is happening half as fast. Here's what our sequence is doing. It's just adding texture. That's nice. And then the right hand arp. Just adding a little bit of extra fullness. All right, so now I'm gonna sit these down just a bit in the mix so that it's not building up too much. So then, let's see if I can get this dystopic lead. Okay, I'm gonna bring my layer range so that I can actually get to that note. And this is just adding some grit to that big, clean, forever new pluck lead. Okay, cool. So let's sit that down just a bit. And then I'm gonna bring in these two pads just to fill some more space. Okay, now I want to just fill a bit more space. I think I'm going to bring in the organ as well to kind of ground the sound, because there's a lot of digital stuff going on, and I want it to feel a little bit more real. Nice. So with these settings dialed in, I can hit the save icon here and save these exact fader positions to this snapshot. Then I could dial in whatever other volume level settings I needed for the rest of the song, and I could save them to a different snapshot so it's easy to get back to there. So let's say I want to start the song just kind of a little bit more down, for those verses. I'm going to take out most of my sequence elements, leave these arps in the background. And I do want my pads, but at a little bit less volume. So I'm going to tap snapshot 2 and hit save. So now I can transition back and forth between all of these settings smoothly over time. This is seamless. So and then here we go. Nice, so I think this patch really is doing a good job of filling the kind of sonic space that I'd want to fill if I was covering this song, and I didn't want to build something completely from scratch for it. Now, of course, the original song has very specific and awesome sounding programming, and these sounds are not exactly replicating that, and that's not the goal here. The idea is to build one patch that can fill all of the kinds of spaces that we get asked to fill as keys players. Okay, so honestly, at this point in the video, I was expecting to have to pause for a good while and prepare some different snapshot settings for the next example song. I wanted to do Holy Forever. I knew that I was gonna do that in the original key of F and at 72 BPM. So I thought, pause the cameras, spend some time, dial in something very unique and specific, and then we'll get rolling again and I'll talk through the changes that I made. Well, in the end, actually, all I did was change the key and change the tempo. And then I played it and it sounded 90% of the way there. So it's only been a couple of minutes. The only adjustments I made here, other than the key and the tempo, is I just brought the volume of the pluck lead down a little bit, the dystopic lead down a little bit, and then I doubled the tempo back up for this Jericho Arp. That's the original setting. And then I brought in just a touch of strings, and I think that's really it. And it sounds, I think, really, really beautiful. So. So to me, just how little time it took for me to dial in such a completely different vibe serves as good validation of the proof of concept here, that if you have a bunch of different sounds in a palette to choose from, you can make really quick decisions and cover vastly different spaces just on very subtle changes to those core sounds. So I think that's pretty darn cool. Let's do one more song. Again, honestly, I was planning to pause, make some changes and tweaks off camera, and then talk through the changes, but I want to try something just real time. Let's do this together. The last song I'm planning to talk through is I Speak Jesus, Charity Gale. So that's in C, and let me check my notes. It's at 74 BPM. So I'll just tap up to 74, and I'm gonna do this right now, and we'll just kind of see what results we get together. So the big part I was thinking of focusing on is the bridge. So let me turn on the metronome just to give myself a quick reference. Okay, so it's really close, I think. It's definitely kind of bigger, brighter than I want it to be for this song, but I can make those adjustments really fast. So there's way more sequence going on here that I want. Holy Forever, lots of sequence elements in the original. I think that's the right vibe. But for this song, I want these to be a bit more subtle. Especially that sequence. In fact, I think what I might do is open the reverb. Watch this, just wash it out with reverb. Kind of takes the teeth off of it. You still get the vibe, but now it's sort of almost a pad or a sound bed element. Just smoosh that out, which is really nice. So here, the thing I'm not loving right out of the gate is the bell-like nature of this Forever New pluck lead. It just doesn't fit the vibe of the song, which is more of a, it just feels very rooted, right? It's very specific. It has this sort of purity to it, maybe fits the message of the song. And that is just really sort of bright, pure, sort of digital sounding. So I'm gonna warm this up by just taking out the low end, or the high end. I'm just rolling back the low pass filter in the EQ. That to me sits a lot better, and then I feel like there's a great opportunity for this dystopic lead to be sort of the more dominant lead. Almost playing like a brass part, like a big raspy sort of trumpet sound. That feels better to me. And then I definitely know that I want this organ to be prominent, and I think this pipe organ might actually have a home here too. Yeah, I think this could really serve that big building, that repeating bridge, which is just the most powerful statement moment of the song, in my opinion. This could be that all-in, sort of all-out moment. All right, well, as an experiment, I think it's a success. Having these 15 different sounds in one patch to rule them all, I mean, I think it kind of rules. I think it's pretty awesome. Leave a comment and let me know, like, which of these sounds is the most useful to you, or do you find one more out of place than the others? Give me some feedback on this patch, what you would change to make your sort of one patch to rule them all. I'm sure there's different things that I might have missed or could have done differently to suit different genres or different player preferences. So here's the thing I'm gonna do though. Pay attention, I'm gonna put a shared setlist link in the description of this video. Now that's something specific to the Sunday Keys app. Inside of every setlist, you can create a shareable link, and anybody else who has the Sunday Keys app can open that shared setlist link on their device, and it's gonna pull that setlist down so you can actually use this patch for yourself. Maybe you already have some ideas about how it would fit in at your church, some modifications you'd like to make, or some songs that you know it would be perfect for. So we'll put the shared setlist link in the description. You can pull that down for yourself and give it a try.